Hello, everyone. It's good to get to talk with you a little more again. Amberle and I both really had a good time in Columbus and appreciated the seminar very, very much. I'm quite sure we were at least as inspired and learned at least as much as all of you did. So thank you. It was a really cool and really special time together.
Yeah, we're so grateful to see how God's working, and so today we just want to come come back and circle back to some of the things that we discussed and um, highlight a few next steps that that we thought of as we were praying and processing.
So we kind of feel led to focus on how some of the things we talked about, some of the subjects and ideas and passages we talked about, how they could influence the things that we're already doing in our churches, ministries, and lives. So the majority of what we talk about in this first part of the time today is going to be talking about not new things you could do or things that you could add on, but really how our discussion could impact and influence what we're already doing with, to think of some big categories, our Sunday service, our small groups, and our ministry outreach events. So we're going to kind of talk about each of those categories a little bit and suggest some ways just from our experience, what other churches have done, that having an awareness that Jesus was deeply committed to people on the margins and that he exhorted his disciples to invite them into their banquets, whatever those may be that they're hosting. So we want to consider together, how that can change what the structures and things we're already doing. So a few thoughts on the Sunday service. I think even just we've seen that when churches begin to talk differently, that's a really profound thing. So in sermons, making reference to people with disabilities as a specific people group that people are making missions efforts towards. So, say you're in a passage in scripture and sermon, and you're looking for an example that highlights people taking the gospel to people who don't currently have the gospel. If you're using examples there, it can be powerful to use people with disabilities as an example. Talk about someone who's gone through the process of learning sign language so that they could reach the deaf population. As these things begin to come into the language of the church, then it changes just people's awareness, and it has been a powerful thing, and we've experienced that in the church that we're a part of, as our churches begin to just talk about disability more.
As well, acknowledging disability in the way that your liturgy is structured. So many of you probably already say or have pastors that say, stand if you are able, just acknowledging that not everyone has the same ability to follow the liturgy as you might, and making those areas where people may not be able to follow your directions because of their disability more known and accepted.
And I'm sure that many of you, as you begin the service and in the service, you kind of have a brief word of welcome or brief word of closing announcement, and there's opportunity for you there too, just maybe to tell the congregation that it's important to us to make our church and our service accessible to anyone that they may want to bring, any family or friends they know, and invite people in your church to say, if they have a family or friend who's impacted by a disability and they feel like that person can't come to the church or wouldn't bring them to the church, just invite them to share that with you, and then see if there's something you could do about that. There might be something small and something easy that could be done, but that changes the sort of focus and awareness for. And we've seen it in our church. As soon as we started to talk about disability more, then all sorts of people started to say, oh, I have a cousin or I have a brother or something, and they just had sort of not felt like they could bring them to church, but then they realized, oh, the church really wants this, and so we can do it. Um, so something like that is a small thing that can also be very powerful. And then also, I think we referenced in the seminar doing a Sunday that highlights disability. That's an opportunity. But you could also do a small sermon series on disability or a small sermon series on people on the margins in Scripture. As you're planning out what's going to be filling in the preaching schedule. Those are things that that could be a great 3 week 3 week thing to go through with the church. So those are a few ideas with some things that can happen to incorporate disability into the language and awareness of the church. Um, we also have seen that experiences have been really powerful for churches. So you might want to do something like having a sign language interpreter come to one of the services. You may have to hire someone to be a sign language interpreter for one service, but even their presence and the congregation experiencing the words of Scripture and the words of the worship songs being signed is powerful, and that impacts them. And you could do something like that. We've done, I think we mentioned having Braille, the Scriptures in Braille listed for on the chairs for the congregation, and that allows people to feel the Scripture like someone who's blind does. And experiences are powerful. Those they never simulate what a person with a disability goes through, but they do bring a special kind of acquaintance with it that we've seen be really powerful. And then another thing that I think that we really want to encourage is, if you do have people with disabilities in your church, you want to figure out how that they can be present, whether it be they're doing the Scripture reading or praying or anything they can do to be present in the service. Also, is a really powerful example, because that historically has not been the case. If people with disabilities have been in the church, which they largely haven't been, they certainly haven't been on stage, they haven't been up front, and they haven't been leading. So we want to see that happen, and you may have someone in your church who's perfectly equipped to do that right now. And then I think just a final idea that comes to mind is that I mentioned we had Scriptures in Braille, but you can also keep Braille Bibles on hand. There's an organization, the Lutheran Braille Workers. They will send you Braille Scripture for free, and it takes a little time because it's a pretty extensive process for them to make it. But in a couple months, you'll start to get it. It'll come in book by book. But you can, for free, you can have a Braille Bible on hand, and then you can let the church know that if anyone here needs Braille Scripture, then we have it. And those small little things, people pick up on that, and it has a big impact.
I think two other things that I would say about service is how important the greeters are. And we actually have a video on our website, the Banquet Network website, with some quick tips for greeters to set the tone for a welcoming environment for people with disabilities. So doing a quick orientation or sending a few PowerPoint slides around to your greeting team can be a really helpful way to make sure that from the moment that somebody comes in, that there's this disability etiquette around the way that they're treated. And then another general idea is, or thought is, on our visitor registration cards in the backs of the seats that people fill out, and to have a space for visitors or people who have been attending to fill in any sort of special needs or accommodations that they'd like the church to know about. That would be helpful for them to participate more fully in the service.
A second sort of structure we want to think about a little bit is small groups. Most of your churches probably have something like a small group, or maybe it's a Sunday school or Bible study, something like that. Something outside of the Sunday meeting where you've got groups of people from the church gathering together. And I think one of the things that we made was a curriculum called Inspire that's on our website and can easily be used. It's a 8-week curriculum kind of covering some theology of disability, and then imagining how that theology can be practiced within the church or within the specific people's lives. And that could be a really good thing to utilize, a really good thing to go through. And we definitely encourage churches to take advantage of that. It's free. You can download it. We have a large text version of it. There's a leader's guide. So I think it's a pretty easy thing to pick up and put into use. So we encourage you to take a look at that. That could be a good way to go. Also, at the seminar, we gave away a few copies of the book Friendship at the Margins, but that book has chapter study questions at the end of it that are very good. So maybe there's a group in the church that wanted to go through that book and go through those questions together. That could be a great way just to get some of this conversation that we are having about disability and people on the margins into the conversation of a small group. And you might be innovative. You might want to craft your own sort of curriculum on looking at different examples in scripture of people who are on the margins and how Jesus interacted with them, how others interacted with them. You may want to go that way. And then I think especially a thing you want to consider too is that what are the barriers that might exist in the small groups that are barriers to people on the margins participating in them. If you're a leader, you may not have as much awareness of the sort of cultures that are developing in small groups, but you might have some small groups that have a very, very intellectual culture that's developed, and they might need to grow in awareness that if someone walks in who maybe doesn't have a master's degree and may not be speaking on with some of the same terminology, that they need to figure out how that person can be welcomed in. So I think that's an important thing to be aware of, especially because the small group can be a little bit of a person's more intimate interaction with the church. And so you definitely want to be fostering cultures that can welcome someone into that, particularly because people on the margins and people with disabilities especially are often so in need of relationship. And a small group is a place where we hope that will develop. And so we need to just put some thought in and some awareness into how we can support that happening in the small group structure. And then I think just to touch on one more category, thinking in terms of the ministries that the church has, or maybe the outreach or events that the church does. I think those are really, really good places to be able to invite people with disabilities into what the church is doing. So I think a helpful starting place there is you can do kind of like some mapping of what is in the area of your church. In scripture, there was the pool of Bethesda, and there was a bunch of I think some translations say it was a place where a large number of disabled people would spend time. And we see that still happens today. There's places where people with disabilities are congregated together. And so we want to find some of those places and figure out how we can invite them into some of the things that the church is doing. So, I mean, in our church's case, we're in Baltimore City, so there's a lot around. But if we just go to Google Maps and we look at the area around of our church, a lot of things pop up related to disability. We've got the School for the Blind close. The National Federation for the Blind is pretty close. There's a veterans hospital and a veterans housing place close to our church. So just by looking at the map, you can see some places where maybe you might want to connect with these organizations and say, our church is having this event. We'd love to invite some of your people to come, make them aware of it. And I think we mentioned in the seminar, but people with disabilities, a lot of times the thing that the organizations working with them aren't able to provide are relationships and connections in the community. And so I think these invitations will be well received in a lot of cases. So that's something that you may want to take advantage of and think about as you are planning and hosting events and ministries. How can we invite the people that Jesus recommended we invite to these things? How can we be faithful to Luke 14 in these things? And I think there's a great opportunity to really see the banquets happening in a way that is faithful to that verse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's so much opportunity, and it can seem overwhelming. This kind of ministry is messy and it's not easy, but we've seen also how much a blessing it is to those who interact, just as Jesus said in Luke 14, if we invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind to our banquets, we will be blessed. For though they can't repay us here, our reward is in heaven. And we just really want to encourage you that it's worth it for that.
Mm-hmm. And then I think I will share also just a few potentially bigger steps if any of you are hoping to take a little bit of a deeper plunge. Just share a couple things that could be done. But on our website, on the resources page, we do have an implementation toolkit, which is like a month-by-month, 7-month guide to kind of get your church really deeply engaged in doing ministry to people with disabilities. And I think that could be a great way to go if you have a handful of people who can who are really passionate about this and want to take up that cause. That could be a really good way to go. Or maybe in your church you just have one person who's really passionate about people with disabilities or people on the margins. You could set that person aside and say, you're kind of our point person, and we want you to do an analysis of our church, our ministries, and report back with some ideas about how we could become more accessible to people with disabilities and more and invite more people from the margins into things we're doing. There's also, I think, another great first step for churches that have the ability to devote a little bit of time and volunteers to it is an organization called 99 Balloons that we're connected with. And they're kind of a organization that gives you pretty much a turnkey system to allow you to host respite nights for people, for families impacted by disability in your neighborhood. Really, really good way to connect with the disability community in your area. Really, really great way to serve. And it's a very well built out system. It will take you through volunteer trainings. It will give you a registration system, paperwork, an ability for parents to submit information about the disabilities of the children that they're going to be leaving with you. It really puts you in a great place to start something. So happy to make that connection for you. And then you could commission a few people to learn sign language and become sign language interpreters in your church. A church in the Banquet Network is in the process of developing a sign language interpretation training program for other churches so that we can have more sign language interpreters, which is awesome. So that's coming. But I hope that these thoughts, these big and small ideas, have inspired you further. Um, we really are passionate about helping you, and we loved our time in Columbus, and want to see God continue to work in big ways in Columbus. So it will be way more transformative if we talk one on one, and we're open to doing that. If you want to talk more about your church, your ministry, your lives, and what steps you might want to take, um, we're happy to talk with you, share the ideas we have. We'll probably learn a lot from you and from your ideas. And so we want to keep the conversation going as much as we can be helpful to you and available to you to do that. We will be. So email us and we'll find a time to talk. And we're excited to follow along and come back to Columbus before too long.
Thanks, guys.